The sun was barely visible above the horizon, casting an eerie glow on the desolate battlefield. The humans had fought so hard to protect Captain Ilara Holt, stood at the head of her team, her face covered in dirt and sweat, but her eyes sharp with determination. Behind her were soldiers in outdated mechs, nothing like the sleek, deadly machines the Xylarians had come to invade with. Still, the team prepared for battle, knowing that they would have to rely on every ounce of ingenuity and grit they had to survive. The Xylarians were known for their technological superiority, their ships and weapons light years ahead of anything humanity had managed to develop. Yet, it was not the machines that worried Ilara the most. It was the belief that her people were too weak to stand up to the Empire that thought they could wipe them out with a single strike. She would prove them wrong. Their first confrontation came without warning, as the Xylarians descended upon the city using their advanced stealth technology to bypass most of Earth's defenses. Within moments, their forces were on the ground, armed with high-tech mechs and weaponry. They were a threat like none the humans had ever faced before. "They think they can just walk all over us," Ilara muttered as she adjusted the settings on her mech's arm. "We will show them that humanity does not fall so easily." The team had been ready for this moment, though they had never faced anything of this magnitude. They had been preparing for years, making do with the scraps of old technology they could find and retrofitting their mechs to fight back against the inevitable onslaught. The first strike began with a flurry of movement, as the human forces launched a series of surprise attacks. They didn't have the firepower of the Xylarians, but they had speed and unpredictability, something their enemies weren't prepared for. Ilara's mechs slammed into a Xylarian war drone with a devastating punch, knocking it off balance as she and her team tore through the enemy ranks. Their old mechs, which were often dismissed as obsolete, had been reworked into fierce machines capable of doing real damage, and in the chaos of battle that made all the difference. "Take them down," Ilara shouted over the comms as her mech spun around and delivered a swift kick to another enemy unit. "This is our world, and we're not letting it go without a fight." The Xylarians were quick to retaliate, their advanced weaponry lighting up the sky as they fired plasma bolts and energy beams in every direction, but the humans adapted, moving like shadows, blending with the wreckage of buildings and old vehicles, using the terrain to their advantage as they outmaneuvered the enemy's superior tech. They fought for hours in an all-out clash of old versus new. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty, but the humans stood their ground, showing the Xylarians that they weren't just scrap metal, they were fighters. And no matter how advanced the enemy was, they had something that couldn't be replicated: sheer willpower. When the dust finally settled, the humans had secured a small but vital victory. The Xylarians had underestimated them. They had thought the humans would flee or crumble under the pressure, but instead they had struck back with force and cunning. Their enemies had been forced to regroup and rethink their strategy. Ilara stood among the wreckage of the battlefield, watching as her team tended to the wounded and salvaged what they could from the destroyed mechs of their enemies. "They thought we were weak," she said softly, "but we've just shown them what we're capable of." The rebellion had begun, and this was only the start. The first victory was a surprise to everyone, including the humans themselves. The Xylarians had expected a swift and easy conquest of Earth, but what they found instead were resilient fighters with old machines and sharp minds. The humans had managed to take down a portion of the invaders' forces, and in the process they had gained something even more valuable: a glimmer of hope. Captain Ilara Holt watched from the command center as her team celebrated their unexpected victory. But she knew this wasn't over. The Xylarians would be back, and in greater numbers. They would adapt and come prepared next time. If they were going to stand a chance against such an overwhelming enemy, they would need more than just good tactics. They would need new weapons and better technology. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly to salvage anything they could from the wreckage of the battle. Ilara assigned Felix Graves, the team's lead engineer and inventor, to oversee the project. He had been working on ways to enhance their mechs for years, and now he was given the resources he needed to bring his ideas to life. Felix was always known for his creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. While others saw only broken technology, he saw possibilities. He had already begun reverse engineering the Xylarians' tech, after the first skirmish, taking apart their fallen mechs and drones with an obsession that bordered on madness. It was his hope that he could turn their own technology against them. The base hummed with energy as Felix worked through the night surrounded by piles of metal scrap and discarded machinery. His fingers flew over the tools and parts, assembling and disassembling components at an alarming rate. Every now and then he would mutter to himself as a breakthrough came, or a new idea struck him with a spark of excitement in his eyes. Ilara watched him from the doorway as he worked. "How's it going?" she asked. "Slow but steady," Felix replied without looking up. "The Xylarians are far more advanced than we are, but their tech isn't perfect. They've made mistakes we can exploit. I just need more time." Ilara knew that time wasn't something they had a lot of, but she trusted Felix. He had never let her down before, and if anyone could turn the tide, it was him. Soon enough, the first prototype of a new hybrid mech was ready. Felix had combined human tech with the salvaged parts of Xylarian drones, creating a mech that was faster, more agile, and more powerful than anything they had before. But it wasn't just about speed or power. It was about flexibility. These new mechs could adapt on the fly, shifting between offensive and defensive modes depending on the situation. "It's not perfect," Felix said after the first test run, "but it's a start, and it's something we can build on." Ilara nodded. "Good enough for me. We need every edge we can get." With the new mechs ready, the humans began testing them in the field. Their first real engagement with the Xylarians using the new tech was nothing short of explosive. The speed and unpredictability of the hybrid mechs threw the Xylarians off guard. Once again, the humans fought with a fierce urgency, knowing that each battle would bring them one step closer to turning the tide of the war. They didn't have the numbers or the advanced tech that the Xylarians had, but they had something far more powerful, something the invaders had yet to fully understand. They had the will to fight and the ability to adapt, and with each new victory they proved that no matter how advanced their enemies were, the humans were not going down without a fight. After their recent success, Ilara and her team knew they had only scratched the surface of what was possible. The new hybrid mechs were proving to be invaluable in the fight against the Xylarians. But it was clear that the invaders were beginning to adapt their tactics. It was only a matter of time before they would figure out how to counter the human advantages. The team needed something more, something that could tip the scales in their favor. As Ilara sat in the command center, she reviewed the latest reports from the front lines. The Xylarians had reinforced their positions and were now pushing deeper into human territory. They were relentless, and their resources seemed endless. But Ilara knew the humans still had one major advantage: the element of surprise, the ability to think and act in ways that no other species could. She stood up and walked over to the communications console where Felix was working furiously. He had been poring over the data collected from the latest battles, trying to find a way to improve their technology and find new strategies to keep the Xylarians off balance. "Any breakthroughs?" Ilara asked him as she watched him work. "Actually, yes," Felix said, looking up from the screen. "There's an old military facility not far from here. I think it was used during the early years of the war. We've got reports that it's been abandoned for years, but the intel suggests there might be something useful inside." "Something big?" Ilara raised an eyebrow. "Something big? How big?" "I'm talking about a weapon," Felix said, his voice full of excitement. "A machine, something unlike anything we've seen before. If I'm right, it could turn the tide of the war for us." The idea of finding a powerful weapon was enticing, but Ilara knew better than to get her hopes up. They had faced so many dead ends before, and it would be dangerous to put all their faith in a single discovery. "How soon can we get there?" she asked. "If we leave now, we could make it by morning," Felix replied. "But we need to move fast. I'm not sure how much longer that facility will remain untouched." Ilara didn't hesitate. She knew that the humans had to take every opportunity to gain an edge over the Xylarians, and this could be their chance. She quickly assembled a small team, and they set out towards the facility under the cover of night. The journey was long and treacherous, the terrain was harsh, and the group had to avoid several Xylarian patrols along the way. but they finally reached the facility before dawn. The place was a ruin long forgotten by most, but there was an unmistakable hum of power coming from deep within the building. Felix led the way as they descended into the underground levels of the facility, and what they found there took their breath away. Hidden in a massive chamber was an enormous war machine, an ancient relic from Earth's past. The design was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It was massive, with thick armor plating and towering legs that could crush anything in its path. But it was clear that it had been built for something far more than just destruction. It was a weapon meant to end the war and change the course of history. "This is it," Felix whispered, his voice full of awe. "This is the Iron Titan." Ilara stared at the machine. Its sheer size and power were overwhelming, but there was no time to marvel at it. They needed to get it operational as soon as possible. The team worked quickly, following Felix's instructions to bring the Titan back online. But as the machine powered up, the air around them crackled with energy, and Ilara knew that this was the beginning of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. With the Iron Titan fully powered up, the team stood in awe of its sheer size and strength. The massive war machine loomed over them, casting a long shadow. As it hummed with energy, Felix had worked tirelessly to get it back online, and now it was ready to be tested. But there was no time to waste. The Xylarians were closing in fast, and the humans needed every advantage they could get. Ilara climbed into the cockpit of the Iron Titan, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with battle. She wasn't sure how well she could pilot such a massive machine, but she had no choice. Her team needed her, and this was their best chance to turn the tide of the war. Felix had already spent hours explaining the controls and making modifications to accommodate her skill set, but nothing could fully prepare her for the power that the Titan possessed. As she activated the systems and the cockpit came to life, Ilara felt a surge of energy pulse. Through her, the Titan responded to her every command with frightening precision. Its massive hands clenched into fists as it stood upright, towering over the rest of the team. The ground shook beneath it as the Titan took its first steps. The sound of its footfalls reverberated through the air like thunder. "How does it feel?" Felix asked over the comms. "Like I'm in a god's hands," Ilara replied with a grin. "This thing is incredible." The team gathered around to watch as Ilara tested the Titan's movement. It was agile despite its size, capable of quick turns and rapid acceleration. She could feel every movement of the machine, as if it were an extension of her own body. The controls were intuitive and responsive, making it easier to maneuver than she had expected. But this wasn't a machine built for speed. It was a weapon built for war. Its armor was nearly impenetrable, and its weapon systems were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Plasma cannons mounted on its shoulders, ready to fire at a moment's notice, and massive blades that extended from its forearms like two enormous knives. The Iron Titan was built to destroy, and Ilara was ready to unleash its full power. Soon enough, the first wave of Xylarians arrived, their forces landing just outside the facility's perimeter. They had detected the human presence and were prepared to strike hard and fast, but they were about to face something entirely new, something they had never encountered before. Ilara activated the Titan's weapon systems, and the air around them crackled with energy. The first plasma blast tore through the sky like a lightning bolt, striking one of the enemy ships out of the air with a blinding flash. The Xylarians were caught off guard by the unexpected firepower, but they quickly regrouped, launching a full-scale assault against the Titan. The battle that ensued was brutal. The Xylarians fought fiercely, but they were unprepared for the raw power of the Iron Titan. Ilara expertly maneuvered the massive machine through the battlefield, dodging incoming fire and delivering crushing blows to the enemy forces. With each step, the Titan sent shockwaves through the ground as its massive fists pummeled the Xylarians into the dirt. Every time the Titan's weapons hit their mark, the Xylarians were sent flying. Their ships disintegrated in bursts of flame. The humans on the ground watched in awe as the tide of the battle shifted. Their once outmatched forces now had the upper hand. They had the weapon they needed to take back their world. "This is it," Ilara shouted over the comms. "We're not backing down now." The humans pushed forward with newfound strength and determination. The Xylarians had underestimated them before, and now they would pay the price for that mistake. With the Iron Titan in their arsenal, The humans were no longer the underdogs, they were a force to be reckoned with, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim their home. The Iron Titan had become the symbol of humanity's defiance against the Xylarians. After the battle, the team stood around the war machine in stunned silence. They had witnessed the sheer destructive power of the Titan and its ability to shift the momentum of the fight. The Xylarians were no longer the unstoppable force they once seemed to be. The humans had something now, something they could use to take back their planet. Ilara stepped out of the cockpit, her legs shaky from the intensity of the battle. She took a deep breath and looked around at her team. The faces of the soldiers were filled with pride and exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. The Xylarians would regroup and launch another attack soon enough. "We need to keep moving," Ilara said, her voice firm. "We've bought ourselves some time, but it won't last long." Felix nodded as he approached her. He had a look of deep thought on his face, as if he were working through something in his mind. "What's on your mind?" Ilara asked. "I've been analyzing the data from the Titan's performance," Felix replied. "I think we can upgrade its systems even further if we can get our hands on more of their technology. There's a chance we can make it even more powerful." "How much more?" Ilara asked. "Enough to give us an edge in the next wave," Felix said. "I think we can modify its energy systems to make it more efficient, and its weapons could be even more deadly with some adjustments. I just need time and resources." "We don't have a lot of time," Ilara replied, but she knew that Felix's ideas could make all the difference. "We'll find a way to get you what you need." The team immediately set out to gather more intelligence on the Xylarians. They began to scout enemy positions and study their movements, searching for any weakness they could exploit. They weren't just looking for technology. They were looking for an opportunity to strike when the Xylarians least expected it. Meanwhile, the Xylarians were far from defeated. Their commanders were furious at the unexpected defeat, and they began to reassess their approach. They had underestimated the humans, and now they would pay the price. Their forces began to regroup and consolidate their power for the next phase of the invasion. They were already preparing their reinforcements and bringing in new advanced weaponry to overwhelm the humans. But the humans weren't sitting idle. They had been preparing for this moment for months. They knew the Xylarians would come again, and they were ready. They had learned from every battle, every mistake, and now they were making their move. In the days that followed, the humans conducted several covert missions to infiltrate Xylarian supply lines. They sabotaged enemy installations and intercepted communication networks, all while continuing to upgrade the Iron Titan with every scrap of technology they could find. Ilara knew that their efforts were paying off. The Xylarians were beginning to feel the pressure. Their supply lines were compromised, and their forces were spread thin. The humans had gained momentum, and with each passing day they became more confident that victory was within their reach. But Ilara also knew that this was far from over. The Xylarians would not give up easily. They would fight to the bitter end to conquer Earth. But the humans had something the Xylarians didn't have. They had the will to survive and the determination to fight for their home. "We've come this far," Ilara said to her team one evening as they gathered around the war table. "We're not stopping now. We take the fight to them, and we make sure they never forget who they're dealing with." The rebellion had begun, and the humans would not stop until they had reclaimed their world and ensured that the Xylarians would never threaten their future again. The humans were moving fast. Their strikes against the Xylarians had become more frequent and more successful with each passing day. The Iron Titan was their centerpiece. Its devastating firepower had become a symbol of hope for the human resistance as they struck against the invaders in the shadows of the night. The Xylarians were struggling to adapt. Their technology was still more advanced than anything the humans had, but they hadn't accounted for the humans' ingenuity and their relentless drive to protect what was theirs. Ilara stood in the command center watching the latest updates flashing on the screen. The Xylarians had launched a large offensive on the Eastern Front, hoping to crush the humans once and for all, but Ilara knew they were in for a surprise. The humans were prepared. They had already anticipated the move, and they had set a trap. "They're coming in heavy," Ilara said as she looked over the intel. "This will be their biggest push yet." "We've got the advantage," Felix said as he stood next to her. "The Iron Titan is ready and the rest of the forces are in position. We just need to wait for the right moment to strike." The minutes seemed to stretch into hours as the humans waited for the Xylarians to make their move. The air was thick with tension as everyone knew what was at stake. Elara was confident in their preparations, but the weight of the situation was not lost on her. If they failed now, it could be the end of everything they had fought for. Finally, the Xylarians arrived, their massive forces descending from the sky. In waves, the ground shook as they landed and began their march toward the human defenses. The humans held their ground, ready to strike, but they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they let the Xylarians advance deeper into the trap. Now Elara ordered, and the first wave of human fighters emerged from their hidden positions, launching an all-out assault on the Xylarians. The Xylarians were caught off guard. They had expected a defensive stand, but what they got was a full-force counterattack. The humans moved with precision and speed, using the terrain to their advantage. They struck at weak points in the Xylarians' formations and disabled several of their mechs before the invaders could even react. The Iron Titan followed closely behind its massive form, cutting through the enemy ranks with ease. The Xylarians were unable to keep up with the sheer power and aggression of the Titan. Its plasma cannons fired with pinpoint accuracy, obliterating anything in its path. Elara guided the Titan through the battlefield as if it were an extension of herself, crushing the Xylarians beneath its mighty feet. But the Xylarians were relentless. They fought back with all their might, calling in reinforcements and bringing in their most advanced weapons. The air was filled with the sounds of laser fire and explosions as the two sides clashed. The battle was intense and brutal, but the humans were holding their ground. Elara's heart raced as she watched the tide of battle shift in their favor. The Xylarians were starting to falter. Their forces were stretched thin, and their numbers were beginning to dwindle. The humans had taken them by surprise, and now they were paying the price for underestimating the tenacity of their opponents. "We're almost there," Elara said as she surveyed the battlefield. "Keep pushing forward." The humans fought with everything they had, their determination unwavering, as they pressed the Xylarians back further and further. Elara knew that this battle was the turning point. If they could break the invaders, well, now they could end the war and secure their future. The Iron Titan roared through the battlefield, unstoppable and unstoppable with each step. The humans made their mark on the world again, showing the Xylarians that they had underestimated humanity's strength. The battle was far from over, but the humans had made a breakthrough. The Xylarians were losing ground, their forces scattered as the humans pushed forward. The Iron Titan led the charge, its weapons tearing through enemy lines, while the human fighters flanked and harassed the Xylarians from all sides. For the first time since the invasion began, the Xylarians were on the defensive. They had been caught off guard by the humans' tactics and sheer willpower. Elara's heart raced as she surveyed the battlefield. The momentum had shifted decisively in their favor, but she knew that the Xylarians wouldn't give up easily. They were a ruthless enemy, and they would fight to the last soldier. "They're regrouping," Felix said over the comms. "They're pulling in all their remaining forces. We need to finish this now before they can recover." Elara nodded. She had anticipated this. The Xylarians had too much at stake to back down now, and they would do everything in their power to crush the human resistance once and for all. The humans had to strike while they still had the advantage. "Prepare for the final push," Elara ordered. "We can't afford to wait." The team quickly rallied their forces. The human fighters and engineers worked together to ensure that the remaining mechs were fully operational and ready for the final assault. Felix remained by the Iron Titan, overseeing its systems as they made their last modifications to ensure it would function at peak capacity. The Xylarians launched their counterattack with everything they had, their remaining forces descending upon the human positions in waves. But the humans were ready. They had fought for this moment, and now they would make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain. "Let's show them who they're dealing with," Elara muttered to herself as she climbed back into the Iron Titan's cockpit. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she wasn't about to back down now. She had seen what humanity was capable of, and she would lead them to victory no matter the cost. The Iron Titan moved forward, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground as it advanced. The Xylarians tried to slow the human assault with concentrated fire, but the Titan's armor absorbed the blasts with ease. Its weapons returned fire with devastating force. Ilara's eyes locked on the horizon as the Xylarians began to retreat, their once confident formation falling apart under the pressure of the human onslaught. But the Xylarians weren't giving up yet. They began pulling in their most powerful war machines, their massive warships hovering just out of reach of the Titan's firepower. "They're bringing in their big guns," Felix said with a tone of worry. "We need to take them down before they can land." "We will," Ilara replied, her voice steady. "We're not backing down now." The final phase of the battle had begun. The humans and Xylarians were locked in a desperate struggle for dominance. The humans fought with everything they had left, pushing forward, even as the Xylarians called in their reinforcements and launched their most advanced weapon systems. The tide of battle turned into a whirlwind of violence, explosions lighting up the sky as the two sides clashed with all their might. But Ilara could feel it in her gut. The humans had taken the advantage, and now they would not let go. They would fight until the last of the Xylarians were defeated or driven off their world. "Hold the line," Ilara shouted as she guided the Iron Titan into the fray. "This is our world, and we're not losing it." The final battle was chaos. Everything seemed to happen at once. The sky above the battlefield was filled with the smoke of burning ships and the flash of plasma fire. The earth beneath shook with the weight of the Iron Titan's steps as it crushed Xylarians beneath its feet. Ilara's hands gripped the controls with unyielding focus. She knew this was the moment that would decide the war. Either they would win here and now, or the Xylarians would wipe them out and take Earth forever. The humans had given everything to reach this point. Their sacrifices were countless and their resolve unbreakable. They had fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground they had taken, and now it was time to end it. The Xylarians had underestimated them from the start, but they had not reckoned with the humans' ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back when all seemed lost. Ilara's voice rang out over the comms as she rallied the troops. "Push them back. We take no prisoners today. Make sure they know who we are." The human forces surged forward, their weapons blazing as the Xylarians tried to regroup, but they were disorganized and retreating, their once pristine formations now in tatters. They had no answer to the Iron Titan, its powerful strikes decimating anything that dared to stand in its way. But the Xylarians were far from finished. They had one last card to play. Their massive warships dropped down from the sky, launching hundreds of drones in a desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle. They came at the humans in waves, targeting the Iron Titan and the human mechs with deadly precision. The air was filled with the sound of whirring blades and crackling energy beams. "They're sending everything at us," Felix said over the comms. "We have to take out their flagship or we're done for." Ilara didn't hesitate. She had already made her decision. She was going to finish this once and for all. She guided the Iron Titan toward the largest of the Xylarian ships. Its massive cannon fired down on them, but the Titan's energy shield held strong. With a surge of power, Ilara pushed the Titan forward and fired its plasma cannons at the ship's weak points. Explosions erupted from the ship's hull as the Titan's shots found their mark. "We're getting closer," Ilara said, gritting her teeth. "Just a little more." With a final push, the Iron Titan launched itself at the flagship. The massive warship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The Titan's giant fist collided with its hull, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The Xylarians inside the ship scrambled in panic, but it was already too late. The flagship was crippled, its systems fried, and its defenses shattered. The Xylarians had no choice but to surrender. Their forces were broken, their command structure destroyed, and their remaining ships scattered to the winds. The humans had won. They had driven the Xylarians off their world and reclaimed Earth for themselves. Ilara sat back in the cockpit of the Iron Titan, her chest heaving. As she tried to catch her breath, she couldn't believe it. The war was over. The humans had done the impossible. They had fought back against an alien invader and won. Outside the cockpit, she could hear the cheers of her team and the soldiers who had fought alongside her. They were victorious. But Ilara knew that this victory wasn't just theirs, it was humanity's. It was a symbol of everything they had endured and everything they had overcome. "We did it," Felix said over the comms, his voice full of emotion. "We actually did it." Ilara smiled and looked out at the battlefield. The sun was rising on a new day. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. It would take time to rebuild, but they had proven that no matter the odds, humanity would always fight for its survival. "Yes, we did," Ilara said quietly, "and we'll keep fighting as long as it takes."